What if your oldest pain is actually your gateway to freedom? There is a silence within us that is not silent. An old void that is not filled with words, promises, or achievements. A dark place, hidden under layers of smiles, routine, apparent normality. But it's there and you know it. Because every gesture of affection seems strange. Because every attempt at proximity seems like a threat. Because, deep down, something you still don't trust. He is still waiting for abandonment. He still shrinks in the face of rejection. You don't remember exactly when it started. But he feels as if he has always been like this. As if the world had demanded that you be too strong, too soon. As if loving was dangerous. As if really existing was a threat. But what if I told you that this fear has a name? That this wound is not the result of chance, nor a mistake in its path? What if I told you that it started before you even understood what pain was? She started on her lap. Or in the absence of it. It began when the look that should welcome, judged. When the hug he was supposed to protect, he demanded. When the love that should be home, became a condition. You were too small to comprehend, but big enough to feel. He felt that he needed to be someone to be loved. That he needed to deserve the affection. That it was not enough just to exist. And that was the first lie the world told you. Because love is not deserved. Love is lived. But you didn't know. So it molded itself. He adapted. He silenced his wishes. He suppressed his anger. He swallowed his screams. He did everything not to bother, to be accepted, not to be left. And then it grew. With an invisible scar on his chest. With a soul accustomed to negotiating its own value. With a heart trained to doubt what should be the most natural, love. But that's not your fault. No one taught you to differentiate love from attachment, care from control, affection from demand. No one told you that you could say no without being mean. That he could make mistakes without being abandoned. That could exist without being perfect. You just reproduced what you learned. He unconsciously recreated that same wound in each new relationship. He sought in others what he did not receive. He tried to heal, outside, what was broken inside. You tried to get someone to love you in such a complete way that it healed the past. But the past cannot be fixed. He stares at himself. Carl Jung knew this. I knew that pain doesn't go away when it's ignored. It just changes its face, its name, its scenery. And it reappears. Whenever someone gets too close. Whenever you need to show yourself vulnerable. Whenever, unintentionally, he hears his own voice repeating words he swore never to say. Words that are not yours. They are hers. That inner figure that lives in you like a distant echo. The archetypal mother. Not the flesh and blood woman who gave birth to you, but the emotional shadow you built of her. A symbolic presence that shapes their decisions, their fears, their relationships. And the biggest trap of this wound, it's that it convinces you that the problem is you. You think you're too sensitive, too intense, too needy. One never asks, what if this intensity is just the reflection of a love that has always been conditioned? Because yes, maybe the love you received was given only when you were well-behaved, productive, helpful. Maybe no one was there when you collapsed. And in the absence of that lap, you learned to stand up on your own. But the price of this was high. Self-sufficiency became prison. Independence, shield. Silence, refuge. And now, even though you want to be seen, heard, loved, you hide. He thinks he needs to do everything right to deserve a little attention. He blames himself for every failure as if it were unforgivable. He is ashamed to ask for help. And he repeats the cycle. Choose people who don't see you. That they demand from you. That they charge you. And you accept. Because it's familiar. Because deep down, you still try to fix that old story. But the past, I repeat, cannot be fixed. He transcends himself. To transcend is not to forget. Nor to forgive for convenience. It is to recognize. It is looking at yourself with brutal honesty and saying, yes, that hurt me. But it doesn't define me. It is to understand that you are not the wounded child, but the adult who can welcome him. That he can finally do for her what no one else has done. Protect, support, validate. You need to become your own mother now. Speak to you tenderly. Stop abandoning yourself. To judge. To treat himself as an enemy. Because healing is not a destiny. It's a process. A path that requires courage. That requires going through pain. Sit it in front of you and ask, "What do you want to show me?" And she will show it. It will reveal the patterns that you repeat. The choices you make out of fear and not out of love. It will teach you that there is no freedom without responsibility. That there is no forgiveness without acceptance. That there is no love without truth. This is the turning point. You no longer need to beg for emotional crumbs. You no longer have to try to fit into molds that suffocate you. You no longer need to obey a past that doesn't match who you are today. But he needs to make a choice. The choice to stop running away from yourself. And that choice starts now. This instant you hear these words. In this moment when something in you recognizes, yes, that speaks of me. You're not alone. It never was. But the time has come to find yourself. To return to your essence. To let the mask fall. To look at the injured child and say, I'm here. And this time, I'm not leaving. The wound is not your end. It is its beginning. It's the portal. The doorway to all that you can become. And when you cross, it won't be the same. You will be whole. The pain you avoid is the same one that keeps the piece of you that is still missing. Have you ever noticed how certain patterns repeat themselves in your life, as if they were scripts written by someone other than you? As if, even with new people, new places, new promises, the plot remained the same? Love that suffocates, absence that hurts, looks that judge, expectations that weigh down. It is as if something invisible drives everything inside. And it really does. That something has deep roots. It comes from afar. It comes from a time when you still didn't know how to protect yourself, but you already knew what pain was. Comes from childhood, yes, but more than that, it comes from an emotional void that has never been named. And because he was not named, he became inflamed. You grew up listening to a voice inside you. A voice that said, you need to be better, you need to please, you can't make mistakes. This voice, disguised as a demand, was, in fact, an echo. The echo of the inner mother you built, not as a choice, but as a defense. It was born of absence, of hardness, of confusion. She didn't come to welcome you. She came to keep you on your toes. And you remained alert. For years. Alerting the body, which has learned to tense the muscles for no reason. Alerting the mind, which questions everything, even what is good. Alerting the heart, which does not surrender entirely because it has learned that loving hurts. But what you may not have realized yet, is that this voice is no longer necessary. You are no longer that child. You no longer depend on conditioned affection. You can build love with freedom. But, for that it is necessary to mourn. The mourning for what you deserve to have lived, and he did not live. The mourning for the childhood that was more survival than discovery. For adolescence, which was more shield than expression. For the youth that was more search than find. Yes, there is a pain in admitting it, but there is also strength. Because recognition is the first step of healing. That's when you stop looking for culprits and start taking the lead in your story. Not as an imposition, but as a reconnection. As a radical gesture of love for oneself. This love, by the way, is what was missing. But it can still be born. But now, it will not come from outside. It will not come from someone who finally sees you. It will not come from a perfect relationship, nor from a compliment, nor from an approval. It will come from a place that you may have ignored all your life. Your own gaze. Because loving yourself is not thinking you are special. It is to include yourself. It's to stop rejecting yourself every day. It's looking at yourself and saying, even with all these marks, I belong to me. You don't have to prove anything anymore. No longer need to fit into tight molds. You no longer need to reduce yourself to be loved. But he will need to learn to listen to himself again. And listening to each other is sometimes uncomfortable. Because his real voice is buried by years of censorship. Years when you said, okay, when it hurt. Years in which he said, I don't care, when in fact he broke inside. Years when I said, I'm strong, when I just wanted to be held. And this is where healing begins to become possible. It starts when you decide not to run away anymore. When he accepts to revisit that dark room inside himself. The one where he kept everything that could not be. Your anger, your neediness, your desire to scream. Yes, you have anger. And it is fair. Anger at having to be an adult too soon. For having swallowed the tears. For not having had someone explain to you that love shouldn't hurt. Anger for having done everything right and yet not having been enough in the eyes of those who mattered most. But now you can give space to that anger. He can welcome it without fear of getting lost in it. Because anger, when recognized, transforms. It becomes strength. It becomes a limit. It becomes clarity. And you need it. You need to learn to say no. You need to learn to choose who stays. You need to learn to distance yourself from those who only know how to repeat their pain. Because as much as it hurts, it is necessary. It's not selfishness, it's emotional maturity. It is to understand that some relationships only feed the wound. That some companies only reinforce the idea that you need to sacrifice yourself to be loved. And you don't need that anymore. Really, it doesn't have to. Life is not all pain. Life can also be light. It can be calm. It could be home. But to live this, you need to make room. You need to empty yourself of what no longer serves you. He needs to release the version he created to protect himself. The one who laughs when she wants to cry. Who takes care of everyone, but forgets. Who lives full of tasks so as not to listen to her own heart. This version was necessary. She saved you. But now it limits you. And the good news is, you can choose differently. Not all at once. But one step at a time. One more step of listening. One more step of presence. One more step of forgiveness, not for the other, but for yourself. Forgiveness for having betrayed yourself. For having diminished himself. For having believed that I needed to be less to deserve more. And as you take these steps, you start to notice something subtle. You begin to realize that there is a new voice within you. A soft but firm voice. A voice that doesn't charge. That does not judge. Who just says, "You're doing fine." That voice is yours. It always has been. But it was hidden under so much noise. And now she comes back. And with it, hope returns. The hope that his story can be different. That your love can be whole. That your presence can be soft. That your heart can finally rest. Not because everything outside has changed, but because on the inside, you chose to free yourself. The most powerful moment of your life is the one when you choose to stop being who pain has taught you to be. Have you ever stopped to think? Who would you be if you hadn't learned to shrink? Who would you be if you hadn't had to adapt so much? Maybe this question hurts. Perhaps it brings an uncomfortable silence. But it is from this silence that the truth is born. Because inside of you there is a version that has never been allowed to flourish. A free version. Spontaneous. But that version was silenced too soon. And for so long that today you may not even know who you are without the masks. The problem is not the mask. The problem is when it sticks. When you get confused with it. When you start to believe that you are, in fact, that person who never feels too much, who always takes care of everything, who doesn't need anyone. And that's when you start to languish in silence. Because no one survives long away from you. And that's exactly what happens when you live to meet expectations that aren't yours. The maternal wound is not just pain. It is also a script. An invisible mold that dictates how you should love, trust, ask, give up. It's a map that always leads you to the same dead ends. And yet, you walk along it as if it were the only possible path. But it is not. It never was. The truth is, you can choose another path. But this choice requires courage. Because it means leaving behind the known. And the known, even if it hurts, comforts. It gives you an identity. He offers you excuses. It protects you from the new. And the new, by definition, is scary. Because being free requires responsibility. It requires self-knowledge. It requires letting go of the fantasy that someone will come to save you. No one will come. And this, contrary to what it seems, is not a sentence. It is a liberation. Because when you understand that you don't need to be saved, you start to rebuild yourself. It begins to look inward not as a battlefield, but as sacred territory. A place that deserves care, attention, respect. And that's where the healing deepens. It is no longer just understanding and becomes transformation. It stops being rational and touches the body, the gestures, the way you occupy the space. You start to walk differently, to speak more firmly, to choose more consciously. Not because he became someone else, but because he finally went back to being who he always was. But make no mistake, this process is not linear. There will be days when you will regress, days when you will doubt, days when you will want to go back to what you were, because it was easier to pretend than to feel. And that's okay. Stepping back is also part of the path. What cannot happen is to abandon yourself again. Because now you know. He knows that he does not need to explain himself to be worthy. That it doesn't have to be useful to be loved. That he does not need to beg for crumbs when he was born to live the banquet of presence. And that presence starts with the way you treat yourself. It starts with the way you embrace failures. In the way he responds to his own pain. With listening, not with criticism. This is the new mothering. Not the one that comes from outside, but the one you learn to offer yourself. That's when you become your own home. When he learns to support himself in the dark days. When he discovers that being alone is not absence, it is an encounter. Because, for the first time, you're not trying to run away from yourself. And in this encounter, you begin to perceive other truths. You realize that your relationships change when you change. That your choices become more honest. That your energy no longer disperses trying to be what you expect. Because now you are what you feel. And that's enough. But there is something more. Something even deeper. That's when you understand that your healing isn't just about you. It's about everyone who comes after. About the children you might have. About the friends who look up to you. About the loves you will live without repeating the same scripts. Because when you heal your wound, you interrupt a cycle. You become a turning point in the line of your ancestry. You become the link that chose differently. And that's big. This is sacred. But even this sacred needs ground. Of practice. Of discipline. Of presence. Because healing is not magic, it is daily. It's saying yes to yourself every day. Even when the voice of the past whispers that you can't. Even when the body still reacts as if love were a risk. Yes, your body also needs to be healed. Because he kept everything. Every silence, every fright, every absence. And he needs to relearn how to relax. To trust. Breathing without fear. So get moving. Tense. Breathe. Touch yourself with affection. Look at yourself with tenderness. Teach your body that it is no longer in danger. And when you do, something opens up. It's as if the layers start to fall off. Layers of pain, fear, rigidity. And underneath it all, you find yourself. With that glow that he always had. With that strength that he always carried. With that peace that seemed impossible. You don't have to carry the world anymore. You no longer need to be strong all the time. You can rest. You can feel it. You can just be. And being, in this world that taught us to perform, is the greatest act of revolution. It is not about overcoming pain. It is a matter of integrating it. To learn from it. To allow it to be part of your story, but not your destiny. Your story begins to change the instant you stop hiding. And now, at this very moment, something in you know. He knows he's ready. Which no longer fits in the old version. That it is no longer possible to live halfway. That you can no longer be satisfied with what you don't nurture. You didn't come into the world to survive in pieces. It came to bloom whole. And blooming hurts. It hurts to leave the earth, to break the shell, to face the light. But this is also where the miracle lies. In the birth of oneself. In the return to the essence. In the reunion with everything you were before the world tried to convince you otherwise. So, close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And feel it. Feel like you've already started. It doesn't matter where you are. If it is falling, rising, paralyzed. If you are silent or in tears. The important thing is that you are here. And to be here, present, awake, aware, it is already healing in itself. Now write if you want in the comments. I chose to free myself from the version that hurt me. Because from this moment on, you are no longer attached to what happened. You are free to create what can still be. That's it, changes everything. You don't have to rebuild yourself with the same pieces you used to survive. There is a point in the journey where everything seems to get mixed up. Where you have already understood the origin of your pain, you have already named the traumas, you have already looked inside, And yet he feels an emptiness. It's as if the wound had stopped hurting so much, but it had also taken away a part of you. You no longer recognize yourself in the old habits, but you have not yet found rest in the new ones. He is no longer where he was, but he has not yet reached where he wants to be. This place, it is the in-between. It is the desert. It's the vacuum between the pain that shaped you and the freedom you're still learning to inhabit. And this is one of the most dangerous moments of the process. Because here the temptation to return is born. To go back to old loves, even if they hurt. Go back to old versions of yourself, even if they imprison you. Return to places you've already outgrown, but that still seduce you with the comfort of the known. But now, more than ever, you need to remember, just because it was familiar doesn't mean it was right. It is not because it was predictable that it was good. It's not because you could stand it that you deserve to go through that. You are learning to see yourself with new eyes. And these eyes no longer accept halves. They are no longer satisfied with silences that cut, nor with loves that demand that you diminish yourself. And this is where a silent pain is born. The pain of losing what you were, even if what you were hurt you. It is the mourning for the old identity. The one who knew exactly how to function in the world. The one who was strong, fast, efficient, always ready to please. The one who swallowed her tears with a smile and said, "It's okay, even in ruins." This version, although rigid, was his armor. But now it weighs. Now it limits. And you feel it every time you try to go back to what no longer fits. It's like putting on an old outfit and realizing that it no longer fits. Because you grew up. Because you've changed. Because now there is consciousness where before there was only instinct of protection. But growing has a price. And that price is the discomfort of the crossing. You ask yourself, who am I now? And as scary as this question sounds, it's also liberating. Because in it there is a choice. And it is from this choice that a new life is born. You can, from now on, create a version of yourself that doesn't come from pain, but from the truth. A version that is not reactive, but creative. A version that does not act out of fear, but out of desire. Who does not live defending himself, but expressing himself. That does not seek approval, but connection. But to do so, he needs to make peace with the unknown. You need to accept that not knowing who you are now. It's the first step to figuring out who you really want to be. It is not the end. It's a new beginning. And in this new beginning, you don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to know the destination. You just need to take a step. One step at a time. A gesture of affection. A healthy boundary. A sincere conversation. A more honest choice. And little by little, the new is formed. Like a soil that remakes itself after the storm. Like a new skin that is born after the wound. Like a heart that, even though it fears, loves again with more wisdom. But pay attention, the new will not come from effort. It will come from rest. Delivery. Give permission to be. Because you've spent your life trying. Trying to fit in, trying to please, trying to prove. Now it's time to simply exist. Yes, just exist. No titles, no masks, no perfection. Just presence. Just truth. It is in this state that healing deepens. When you stop fighting who you are. When you stop asking permission to feel. When you begin to inhabit your body with more gentleness, your mind with more silence, your soul with more listening. And something magical happens. You begin to perceive beauty where you once saw threat. He begins to allow himself to laugh again. He begins to trust himself without needing confirmation. He begins to get up not because he has to, but because he chooses to live with integrity. And then you start to love differently. He loves without losing himself. He loves without carrying the other. He loves without having to erase himself. Because now you don't love to be saved. Love to share. To grow. To expand. And perhaps, at this point, you realize something profound. The wound has brought you here. She was the call. The gate. The crack through which the light entered. And as much as it hurt, it also woke you up. It awakened the sensitivity that you denied. It awakened the courage you didn't know you had. It awakened his essence, the one that was never wounded, only dormant. And now she's waking up. You are no longer the wounded child. Neither is the hardened adult. You are the bridge between the two. It is the one who listens, welcomes, transforms. He is the one who rewrites history without having to erase what was. And by doing so, you become a guide. Not of those who teach with ready-made answers, but of those who live their own truth with such completeness that they inspire silence. Presence. Yes, now it's about peace. Not the peace that depends on control, but the peace that is born of acceptance. Accept that life was as it was, that the wounds hurt as they did, but now you're here, alive, ready, entire. And this wholeness is not the absence of pain. It is the presence of meaning. It is knowing that each scar has a story, and that each story has something to teach, and that you, despite everything, still choose to love. Choose to continue. Choose to be. Then breathe. Place your hand on your chest, and feel it. You've made it this far. And this is no small thing. That's all. Write in the comments if you like. I choose to live beyond my wound. Because now it's the beginning of everything.